Name's Josey Wales.
Got nowhere to go.
And you will die. I came here to die with you.
The outlaw Josey Wales made Clint Eastwood a Western legend, but behind that steely gaze lurked Hollywood's deadliest power struggle. Directors were fired mid-production, the DGA tried to destroy Eastwood's career, and real Civil War veterans. They called the film a lie. These are 10 shocking secrets about the outlaw Josey Wales. And the bonus? Eastwood's famous spitting scenes hid a disgusting truth. Are you gonna pull those pistols or whistle, Dixie? Because this revenge story gets bloodier than any bushwhacker raid. 1. Clint Eastwood destroyed Philip Kaufman's career. Here's what they never told you about Clint Eastwood's ruthless takeover that ended Philip Kaufman's directing dreams forever. The veteran filmmaker was fired from his own project after Eastwood decided he wanted complete creative control, using his star power to orchestrate a hostile coup that shocked the industry. Kaufman watched helplessly as his artistic vision was stolen and his reputation destroyed by an actor who couldn't tolerate sharing power with anyone. What the DGA didn't expect. Eastwood's systematic campaign to discredit Kaufman included spreading false stories about incompetence and unprofessionalism that followed the director for decades. The devastating truth? Kaufman's later struggles to find work weren't due to lack of talent. They were the direct result of Eastwood's character assassination campaign designed to justify his takeover. The man who played a vengeful outlaw was actually more ruthless than his fictional character, destroying careers with the same cold calculation that Josey Wales used to kill his enemies. Hollywood's unwritten rule about respecting directors meant nothing to an actor drunk on his own power. 2. The Directors Guild launched a secret war. Nobody knew that the Directors Guild of America tried to end Clint Eastwood's career through a coordinated industry blacklist designed to punish his directorial coup. The DGA's investigation into Eastwood's takeover from Philip Kaufman revealed systematic contract violations and professional misconduct that should have destroyed any other performer's future. What shocked guild leaders most? Eastwood's defiant refusal to acknowledge their authority or accept responsibility for his actions, treating their concerns like the complaints of weak men who couldn't understand real power. The devastating truth? The DGA's attempt to discipline Eastwood backfired spectacularly when his box office success made their threats meaningless. Studio executives chose profits over principles, abandoning the guild's authority to protect an actor who could guarantee massive returns. Eastwood had proven that in Hollywood, success trumps ethics, and the Directors Guild learned they were powerless against stars who generated enough revenue to buy their own justice. Third Civil War veterans called the film propaganda. Here's the shocking truth about the vicious backlash from actual Civil War descendants who accused the outlaw Josey Wales of rewriting history to glorify Confederate terrorism. Real family members of Union and Confederate soldiers were horrified by the film's romanticized portrayal of guerrilla warfare that had actually been brutal, indiscriminate killing that destroyed innocent communities. What the veterans groups didn't expect, their protests and historical corrections were completely ignored by a studio more interested in selling tickets than respecting truth. The devastating truth? The film's sympathetic portrayal of Confederate bushwhackers whitewashed actual war crimes and atrocities that had traumatized entire regions for generations. Eastwood's heroic outlaw was based on real terrorists who had murdered civilians, burned towns, and committed acts that would be called ethnic cleansing by modern standards. The entertainment that audiences enjoyed was built on the sanitized version of America's bloodiest conflict, turning mass murderers into romantic anti-heroes for people who didn't know the real history. 4th, Sandre Locke's abuse started here. Here's what they never told you about Sandre Locke's introduction to the systematic psychological abuse that would define her relationship with Clint Eastwood for decades. The actress's seemingly romantic chemistry with Eastwood on screen masked a controlling dynamic off camera where he manipulated her career decisions and personal choices. Locke discovered too late that her breakthrough role came with strings attached that would trap her in an abusive relationship disguised as professional partnership. What the industry didn't realize? Eastwood's famous protection of his leading lady was actually possessive control that isolated her from other opportunities and potential allies. The devastating truth? Locke's authentic performance as a vulnerable woman seeking protection came from her genuine fear and dependence on a man who was already beginning to manipulate and control her. The romantic subplot that audiences loved was actually documentation of the early stages of an abusive relationship that would destroy Locke's independence and career prospects for years to come. 5. The spitting scenes spread real disease. Nobody knew that Clint Eastwood's famous tobacco spitting created a genuine health hazard that infected multiple cast and crew members with communicable diseases. The actor's authentic chewing tobacco use wasn't just character method. It was a dangerous habit that contaminated sets and endangered everyone around him. What shocked the medical consultants most? Eastwood refused to use fake tobacco or practice proper hygiene, insisting that his authentic spitting was essential for the character's credibility. The devastating truth? Several extras and crew members contracted oral infections and other illnesses from exposure to Eastwood's tobacco spit that contained bacteria and viruses dangerous to human health. The production became a disease vector because one actor's ego was more important than basic sanitation and safety protocols. The authentic Western atmosphere that impressed audiences was actually created through biological contamination that put innocent people at risk for the sake of one man's vanity project. 6. The Cherokee actors were systematically exploited. Here's the devastating truth about how the Outlaw Josey Wales exploited Native American performers while pretending to honor their culture and history. The Cherokee actors hired for authenticity were paid substandard wages, given no input on their character development, and forced to perform stereotypical roles that bore no resemblance to actual Cherokee traditions or values. What the tribal representatives didn't anticipate: their cultural consultations were ignored in favor of Hollywood cliches that reinforced harmful stereotypes about Native Americans as noble savages or mystical guides for white protagonists. The devastating truth? The film's supposedly respectful portrayal of Cherokee people was actually another example of cultural appropriation that used indigenous performers as props in a white man's revenge fantasy. The authentic Native American presence that gave the film credibility was achieved through the same exploitative practices that had oppressed indigenous communities for centuries. Eastwood's progressive inclusion of Cherokee characters was actually regressive tokenism that perpetuated harmful myths while denying real Native Americans agency in their own representation. 7. The horse stunts killed multiple animals. Here's the shocking truth about the animal cruelty that was covered up during the Outlaw Josey Wales production to protect Eastwood's reputation and the film's commercial prospects. Multiple horses were injured or killed during the film's elaborate chase sequences and battle scenes, but their deaths were hidden from animal welfare groups and the general public. What shocked the veterinary consultants most? The production used dangerous techniques and inadequate safety measures that guaranteed animal injuries, but the spectacular visuals were considered more important than animal lives. The devastating truth? The authentic Western action that thrilled audiences was created through systematic animal abuse that would be considered criminal by modern standards. Several horses died in agony from injuries sustained during filming, but their deaths were covered up to avoid negative publicity and potential boycotts. The film's celebration of frontier justice was built on actual injustice toward creatures who couldn't defend themselves against human greed and callousness. 8. Eastwood's racist remarks poisoned the set. Nobody knew that Clint Eastwood's private conversations during filming contained racist language and attitudes that created a hostile work environment for minority cast and crew members. The actor's public image as a progressive filmmaker masked personal prejudices that he expressed freely when he thought nobody important was listening. What the minority performers didn't expect. Eastwood's casual racism affected casting decisions, scene development, and the overall treatment of non-white performers who were marginalized and disrespected throughout the production. The devastating truth? The film's attempts at racial reconciliation and understanding were undermined by its stars' actual beliefs and behaviors, making the inclusive themes feel hypocritical and dishonest. Eastwood's performance as a man learning to overcome prejudice was particularly offensive to people who had witnessed his real attitudes toward racial minorities. The movie's message about healing and unity was contradicted by its creator's private bigotry, making the whole production feel like elaborate public relations designed to hide an ugly reality. 9. The budget was stolen through fake expenses. Here's the devastating truth about the massive financial fraud that inflated the Outlaw Josey Wales budget, while money was secretly diverted to Eastwood's personal projects and investments. The production's accounting was deliberately manipulated to hide millions of dollars in fake expenses that enriched Eastwood and his associates while cheating investors and profit participants. What the studio auditors discovered too late? Eastwood had used his dual role as star and director to authorize fraudulent payments to shell companies he controlled, essentially stealing from his own movie to fund his growing business empire. The devastating truth? The film's success generated massive profits that should have been shared with other participants, but creative accounting ensured that most of the money ended up in Eastwood's pockets. The outlaw who robbed banks on screen was actually robbing his business partners in real life, using Hollywood accounting tricks to legitimize theft that would be felonious in any other industry. The man who played a character seeking justice was actually perpetrating injustice on an industrial scale. 10. The real Josey Wales family sued for defamation. Here's the shocking truth that nobody talks about. The descendants of the real historical figures who inspired Josey Wales launched a massive lawsuit claiming the film defamed their ancestors and distorted their family history for commercial gain. The actual family members were horrified to discover their relatives had been transformed into fictional characters without permission or compensation, with their tragic Civil War experiences exploited for entertainment. What the lawyers didn't anticipate? The lawsuit revealed that Eastwood and the studio had deliberately avoided seeking permission from the families because they knew their portrayal was historically inaccurate and potentially offensive. The devastating truth? The real people behind the Josey Wales story were nothing like Eastwood's romanticized character, and their actual experiences were far more complex and morally ambiguous than the simple revenge narrative audiences enjoyed. The film's success was built on stolen family history that was distorted beyond recognition, making the entertainment a form of historical grave robbing that profited from other people's tragedy. Bonus fact: Eastwood's famous squint hid his vision problems. Here's what they never told you about Clint Eastwood's iconic squinting expression that became his trademark. The famous facial expression wasn't an acting choice. It was Eastwood's attempt to hide serious vision problems that he refused to correct with glasses, because he thought they would damage his tough guy image. The devastating truth? His signature look was actually a disability that he was too vain to address properly, forcing him to perform action scenes while essentially half blind. The squint that made him a star was really just vanity disguised as method acting. The Old West looked like pure justice in 1976, but Josey Wales' reality was dirtier than any cattle drive. Want more shocking Western secrets that'll make you question your heroes? Hit subscribe and ring that bell. This frontier gets lawless.